So, what I have learned from sailing, let me clarify something first of all. I think I may have salt water flowing through my veins. I absorbed it through surfing, scuba diving, snorkeling, water skiing, but most of all, through sailing. I can remember water and sailing before I can remember school. I grew up crewing and then skippering what's called one design racing sailboats. And theoretically, that means that everyone is identical. So it's about the skill of the sailor more than the technology of the boat. And they were called penguins, comets, lightnings. I'm very blessed that I had that kind of childhood. But I also worked in the yacht charter business and as a charter and delivery captain. So what does this have to do with learning? What does this have to do maybe with leadership? Well, racing is a special part of sailing, a special kind of sailing. And the difference between racing and particular and sailing in general, I think is very useful for understanding how we lead and how we learn and how we develop. I have taken off by myself for a solo sail many times, a week or so. Um, when I when I tell people I'm going sailing, the first question is always, "Where are you going?" And I always reply the same way with a smile. I already told you. Sailing is my destination, not reaching a finish line. And that's a crucial difference, I think, between the kind of sailing mindset and the racing mindset. Now, my racing mindset and my racing experience gave me a very keen understanding of the physics of sailing. Being intense about sailing increases focus. It also increases tension. And over time, that tension for me got in the way of my intuition, and sailing became a mind game, detached from emotion, except for anger, uh, and even from learning about anything that didn't contribute to that narrow goal. And that narrow goal was doing it better than the next guy. Nothing wrong with that, I think. I'm very competitive. It runs in the family. My father was the national senior sunfish champion. That's a little teeny sailboat, several times. I'll never achieve that. It's not on my radar, as it were, because I like to sail too much. My father's frame for being on the water was racing. He zeroed in on gaining advantage, using the rules to win, paring down everything he focused on to what was singular and useful for winning the race. He also grew up in a different world than I, and his frame, at least in part, reflected that, I think. So here's some differences between the racing brain and the sailing brain. The racing brain is excitement tempered with boredom, like when the wind stops. The sailing brain, the sailing mindset, is serenity tempered with excitement. Racing is about subtraction. If there's 40 boats, there can only be one winner, which means the only other 39 are SOL. Sailing is about addition. It's all connected. It's all connected. Racing is about direction. Sailing is about flow. Racing, the goal is to finish the race, preferably as the winner. The goal of sailing is to continue. Racing, you have adrenaline throughout the entire time. Sailing, we keep our adrenaline in reserve. Because racing is what I call an imposed urgency. There's a sailing saying that being on the water on a sailboat is 90% pleasure and 10% terror. When sailing, a gentle, tranquil cruise can turn into getting hammered by a line of violent squalls. And it can happen really, really fast, trust me. And that's when our experience and our common sense and intuition and skill and adrenaline combine for, with any luck, a great story. And I've got some good emergency sailing stories. So racing imposes what for me is a false and constant sense of emergency. If you've ever passed a sailboat boat race, you may have heard the yelling seasoned with some spicy nautical epithets. Sailing, as opposed to racing, saves urgency for the appropriate emergency. Racing imposes that sense of emergency for effect. It's almost as if racers are bored when they're merely sailing. In truth, many of them actually are. I certainly have gone sailing with some avid racers who very quickly got bored by just sailing, which is too bad. So, now, in the workplace and in our schools, I think we too often impose the racing mindset of getting it done. Hurry up, overload everyone. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. Learning is hard work. No pain, no gain. You're not here to have fun. Ouch. I choose not to live that way, which is maybe why I love sailing. So I suggest that a false layer of stress is something we would do well to avoid, especially now. We know from a fellow named Hans Selye's work, he's kind of the godfather of stress, that prolonged stress erodes performance, reduces big picture awareness, and eventually can kill us. It ain't good for us over time. And for me, at least, the racing mindset overlays the joy of sailing with the stress of competition. Is racing exciting? Well, it certainly can be. But if you've ever sat becalmed during a race, there's no racing at all. In fact, I've heard more than one person, including myself, why the blank do they call this racing? We're not even moving. So the excitement just turns into frustration. Racing does build teamwork of your team, exclusive to the other teams. It does introduce and help us learn some very tactical wisdom and a sense of accomplishment. But it also reduces, I think, the ability to enjoy sailing. Sailing, no destination. When I'm sailing, I'm at my destination, which is I'm on the boat. Stop when you feel like it. I live in the Chesapeake Bay. We have 6,000 to 7,000 miles of shoreline, depending upon who you read and pay attention to. I can stop whenever I want. And I arrive when I get there. If I arrive at a town where I wanted to eat and I'm too late for dinner, I've got food in the boat. I'll go anchor and I'll just eat there. So it's not, as soon as you're on your sailboat, you're at your destination. That's the sailing mindset. The racing mindset says you get on a sailboat to go somewhere. Very different. And those of us who think that leadership and learning work best when we're only in the racing mindset, I think it's time to take a second look. And that's based on health data and neurology and a whole bunch of stuff. So I call it the sailing life frame. When we're relaxed, we're open to this flow of new information. We're not much pressured by outside events. I think we make better decisions, and I think we create stronger, more even relationships that come closer to being partners in the experience rather than I'm captain and your crew. Save the emergency urgency for the real thing. Just sail. And I mean, in life, when we focus on what we can control, I can control the steering wheel, zooming the engines off, trimming the sails, adjusting the direction of the boat. That kind of alertness, being really tied to and connected to what's going on, that comes for me, I've learned from being relaxed. And when I'm relaxed, I provide a better model for the people that I try to serve. It's the opposite of the big guy with the whip and the drum beat who drives us. Thank you.